Thank you so much for having me today. You made me sound really, really good, and hopefully I live up to those expectations. As Bill said, my name is Tara Brent. I'm the 4-H extension agent for Lancaster and Northumberland counties, so up in the Northern Neck. And I was actually telling them a story before we started that I was very glad I left early today because there just so happened to be that one accident that closed 17 both ways for about an hour. So I was really, because if any of you are familiar with that part of the state, there's not exactly many alternate routes. So I knew I was going to be sitting for a while. So something told me this morning I should just come early. So I'm glad that I did. I have been with Extension for 11 years. That whole time I've been working with 4-H. And before that, for 7 years, I was a special education teacher in Virginia. I am a William & Mary grad, so it was nice to be back in Williamsburg. And I'm married to a college professor, and we have 2 children. And I'm going to let you know, typically I would not have my cell phone sitting here while I'm doing a presentation. But in the world of COVID school, I'm going to refer to it as COVID school, pretty much on a daily basis, something changes with my children's schedule. Both of them are in middle school and play sports or in band. Every day, something is either canceled, someone's quarantined, I need a ride now. So I have this sitting here just in case I need to send a text to someone else, because this is going to be about when they get out of school. So I apologize that it's sitting there, but unfortunately, at least they're in school every day. So we can think of it positively that way. So this presentation is going to talk about just some things to keep in mind when you're working with youth. And Bill was right. Some of it really is applicable when you're thinking about all the populations you work with. These are best practices as educators. And I'm overwhelmed to see just how many of you in your Master Gardener chapter want to work with youth. I think that's awesome to see so many of you online and here in person saying, I want to do this training because I want to continue working with youth. I know that maybe over the last year and a half, your youth programs have not been the same. Maybe some of them have been non-existent because you haven't been able to go into a school or go into a community center and do it. But hopefully this will give you some tips when those programs start back up that you will be ready to go. Because I know my Master Gardeners on the Northern Neck have been itching to try to figure out how can we get back, because they typically do a lot of programs in school, and they've really been itching trying to figure out how can we get back with the school kids but do it safely. And for everyone online, if you have a question, please just put it in the chat box and I'm going to answer them at the end because it'll be too difficult to try to look at the chat box throughout. So if you put them in the chat box, I'll check it when we're finished. So because usually everyone likes to know where we're headed, I'm going to start with just a little introduction to 4-H, and then we're going to talk about the essential elements of positive youth development, as well as the idea of experiential learning and life skills, some of those risk management considerations when you work with youth, and some of them really are applicable to every audience you work with. Thinking about some record keeping as far as youth programs, and then wrap up with some questions. And I have a few times where we'll try to be as interactive as possible. I do have an activity we're going to do together. So anyone have any questions before we start? All right. Right, so first, just in case 4-H is a little new to you, I'll tell you it was new to me when I started with Cooperative Extension. First off, anytime you do a youth program with Cooperative Extension, so as a Master Gardener, you are completing a 4-H activity. 4-H is the youth arm of Cooperative Extension. We work with ages 5 to 19, so that's typically your school-age children. So that would be, you know, we think about how old a child will turn in the grade, so between pre-K and their first year of college is about that age range. We are the largest youth development organization in the United States. We have more members than things such as Scouts, BSA, and Girl Scouts combined, Boys and Girls Club, those type of things. We are also located in over 70 countries. And that was a really big step because you may notice that little teeny writing on one of the bottom right leaf of the clover. That is the trademark. USDA has the 4-H clover trademarked. So for a long time, USDA was very careful of that clover and didn't want it outside of the United States. Well, just in the past about 10 to 15 years, 4-H has expanded worldwide. So that the clovers might look a little bit different, but the idea of positive youth development is the same. I actually had the opportunity with Virginia Extension to bring 4-H to Senegal, West Africa. So that's one of the countries that we have worked to bring 4-H to. 4-H centers around 3 main areas, which are STEM, healthy living, and civic engagement. And we do that through in-school programs, which I know your Master Gardener group has done in the past. We do after school, community clubs, that might be what you think traditionally as 4-H programs, like maybe that horse club or the livestock club. 4-H camp, which you are lucky enough to have one of our 4-H camping centers right here in James City County, as well as sometimes special interest programs. That could be maybe a community festival or an event outside in the community. As I said, we're the youth development arm of Cooperative Extension, and we use research-based curriculum to make our programs happen. And I have some examples later on of what might be some of those curriculums you could use as Master Gardeners in working with youth. So you might ask, well, what sets 4-H apart? The YMCA does great youth programs. The Boys and Girls Club does great youth programs. There are many other youth development organizations. So what really sets 4-H apart? And what sets 4-H apart, as well as the youth programs for Extension, is this. These are the 4 essential elements of a youth development program in Extension. Okay, so this means these are the 4 things we want to have in all of our youth development programs. One is the idea of mastery. We want to help build those skills in youth to take them from beginner knowledge in something, get them interested in learning more, and then get them to a level where they feel like they have mastered that topic. The idea of generosity, the idea of belonging, and the idea of independence. Okay, so those are the 4 pillars that we look at when thinking about forming a program. The belonging, do they feel a part of the group? 4-H is inclusive of all youth. Do they feel, do the youth feel a relationship with caring adults? That might be volunteers, that could be teachers, that could be 4-H staff, okay? The idea of independence, where the youth that have some choice in what they're doing, that youth can help each other, okay? So these things are more important. You know, we may be teaching, okay, we're going to teach you the parts of a plant today in school. But let's think about this as our end goal. I might be doing a year-long school program on robotics, but really what I'm focusing on is how can I build teamwork in those youth? How can I, at the end of the year, hope they say, you know, I really felt a part of 4-H. I felt a part of the program. I was important to my team's success. Or if I'm working with a group, I'm important to the rest of the group, okay? So these 4 things equate to these, and I'm gonna read them because I know that image is a little hard to read. So 1, are we providing a safe environment? So that's the whole idea of risk management. Are we thinking about what risks might be involved and making sure that the space is physically safe as well as emotionally safe, right? Making sure that youth are being respectful to each other. The idea of caring adults. You may be, if the Master Gardeners do a recurring program with the same youth, you're going to build relationships with those youth, right? And you want those youth to look at you as a caring adult in their lives, okay? Just like they may look at, oh, I go to after school at the Y. You know, they're going to look up to you as, oh yeah, the Master Gardeners are coming today. You know, Miss Sally's going to come to my class today. I'm really excited. So you want to think about that you might be that caring adult in that child's life. Helping them see themselves in the future, maybe teaching them about horticulture will get them excited about gardening, and they want to continue to garden in the future. The idea of service, so possibly incorporating some community service into the projects that you do, letting them see that they should help the environment around them. self-determination so that they can set goals for themselves. That could be as simple as if you're planning a program and giving the youth some choices in what they do, helping them be engaged in their learning, so making it hands-on. And we're going to do an example of that in a minute. We talked about the idea of mastery and making sure the environment is inclusive. I don't think any of these are really surprising or hard to believe. These are all things that we hope every classroom has. We hope that I would hope that my children feel these things when they're working with adults in school or outside of school, okay? So these things are really the pillars of our positive youth development program. So they're things for you to keep in mind when you're creating a youth program or you're leading a program with youth. Now you might be asking, well, we're just going to have a booth at a festival. How could I possibly be thinking about mastery and self-determination if they're only going to be coming up to the booth for just a few minutes? You know, that's one of our children's programs. You might be thinking, okay, you can make sure that you make that environment safe. What are the things you can control for that? Maybe having a hands-on activity rather than just having something where you talk to the youth, make it hands-on so they can be engaged. Maybe giving them an opportunity, if you want to learn more, here's somewhere you can go. Here's a website you can go. Here's something you could do at home. So sometimes it's difficult to make sure all of these are there every time, but it's just keeping these in the back of your head when you're planning a program with youth to make sure that you are thinking about what is essential to a 4-H program, making sure that your program is as high quality as it can be. So I mentioned experiential learning. Really, that's, if you've ever heard the phrase learn by doing, that's really what experiential learning is. Very simply, it could be that triangle in the middle that says do, reflect, apply. It could also be what, so what, and now what. The whole idea is that the children do an activity, then they reflect on the activity, then they think about how can I apply this to my life later on. So it's not just doing a simple activity with them, but it's processing it afterwards. And that's probably one of the most important things to do that I know even I forget sometimes. You think about the time limits of a classroom lesson. And you laid it out, you have all these great activities, but then you run out of time to ask some reflection at the end, or you run out of time to ask some application. That's something to think about, incorporating that into those great lessons that you're already doing, getting the kids to think about, well, why did we do this? Why is this important? Okay, so we're gonna practice this experiential learning model together. So Forrest, I'm gonna ask you to give everyone one of these, and everyone at home, you can participate as well. You just need a scratched piece of paper because it's not gonna look great when we're done. So you can have, I apologize at home, you're not gonna have a red heart like my friends in person are gonna have. Just have a scratched piece of paper, and I'll tell you what to do with it in a second. So you're getting a half sheet that has a heart written on it. So there's a purpose. This activity is actually a character education activity, but I'm using it to demonstrate this model to you, how it would work in person, okay? My office yesterday asked me, they said, are you going to color all the hearts? I said, no, that's what red paper is for. Great. All right, so everyone at home, you have your piece of scratch paper.
That'll Ruth.
Everyone live, you have your red heart, okay? I'm going to read a story to you that's called The Wrinkled Heart. And the story is going to tell you, it's about a little boy and his heart. So when the story tells you something about his heart, I want you to replicate that with your heart, okay? You're not going to need a pen, just a piece of paper. And it'll make sense as we get started. Okay. One morning, a small boy woke up and started his day. He got dressed by himself, put on his own shoes, and even started brushing his teeth without being asked. He was having a great time. There was water on the floor, water on the mirror, water on the bathroom counter, but he was brushing his teeth. It was a hectic morning, and when the boy's mother came in and saw the water, she scolded him for the mess, and the boy's heart crumpled a little bit. So crumple your paper a little bit. The small boy bounced downstairs, determined to have a good day, even though his mom yelled at him. He saw the cereal and milk on the table and decided to fix his own bowl. But the milk carton was heavy and the milk spilled all over the table. The boy's father was trying to read the paper, and when he saw what happened, he called his son clumsy. The small boy's heart crumpled even more. So crumple your heart a little bit more. It was the first day of school for the boy. When he boarded the bus, the driver, who really wanted to be at home on summer vacation, told him his new socks looked silly. Needless to say, the boy's heart crumbled even more.
What?
Good. Can't you?
No.
Into
No.
class,
Yes.
No.
he
No.
realized he didn't have his milk money. When he told the teacher that he forgot, she threw up her hands and said he just had to skip milk today. The boy's heart was all crumpled up. Tomorrow is a new day for the boy. When tomorrow came, the boy went to brush his teeth. When his mother came in, she gave him some towels and asked him to
I don't know.
counter when he was finished. And she showed him a special
Why did my
plate
voice reflect?
and toothpaste.
Why is this thing talking?
The boy's heart unwrinkled a little bit. So unwrinkle your heart a little bit.
Excuse me, the folks at home are going to have to put it on mute because we're picking you up here in the auditorium. Dave, can you mute everybody except Tara, please? Thanks.
When the boy went downstairs for breakfast, the milk spilled again. The boy's father gave him a sponge to wipe the spill and poured some milk into a more manageable pitcher for the boy. The boy's heart felt better and unwrinkled even more. When the boy got on the school bus, the driver told him what neat pants he was wearing. The boy's heart was really smoothing out. Today was only the second day of school, and the boy remembered his lunch, but he forgot his milk money again. The teacher told the boy that everyone forgets things sometimes, and she would find a way to help him remember. The boy's heart unwrinkled even more and felt pretty good. But the boy's heart wasn't as smooth as it used to be. It still had some creases and wrinkles from being all crumpled up. It takes a long time to smooth out the wrinkles. So I know that activity had nothing to do with horticulture, but I had us do it to go through this model. So we just experienced, we engaged in the activity, okay? Next, let's share. So how did that feel doing that activity? Listening to the story and then crumpling up your heart. It was kind of sad. How about smoothing it out? Felt better? Yeah? Yeah, it was kind of hard. I know when I experienced this activity the first time as a participant, I had that mom guilt in the pit of my stomach going, oh, I've probably done those things. I'm sure I have. Right? It made me think about times, oh, I probably did that. Okay. So in the sharing stage, you kind of give them an idea, talk about their feet, how they felt, their reactions to the activity. Okay. Now let's move on to processing. Okay. How do you think, what did you learn by doing this activity? Did you have any aha moments? What do you think the point of it would be? If I was doing this with youth for character education, what would be the point of doing it?
Personal awareness of what you're saying.
So personal awareness of what you're saying. right? What, to other people? Anything else? Think before you react, right? His heart crumpled with reactions from others, right? How he got negative reactions from others and his heart crumpled, right? But then positive reactions from others helped him feel better. So just those, the concept of thinking about what how your reactions can affect someone else. Was there anything difficult about that activity? Or was it difficult for anyone to do it?
It's forced to self-reflect and how you might be doing that, regardless if it's a child or an adult, a critter.
Yeah. Right, because let's be honest, everyone sometimes reacts negatively or reacts the way they shouldn't, right? We don't always think before we react, right? So this, I think, brought that to light. So sometimes that's kind of hard hearing that, realizing, oh yeah, because the whole toothpaste example, I could see that in my house on a daily basis, water all over the sink, but remembering, wait a minute, they did it without being asked. Let's praise that and help give them the tools they need to maybe do it not quite as messy, okay? So we reflected, now we're gonna apply it, okay? So let's thinking about, so this is the so what part. Has anyone ever experienced an activity like this before? Or thought about something like this before? So when I do this with kids, they think, can our heart really wrinkle like this? You know, they immediately think, does this really happen? What do, you know, they're taking it literally. And we think of, well, no, but, you know, all those things that people have said to you might add you know, hurt your heart, right? Might make you feel sad. It might make your heart have a little wrinkle and they don't go away right away. We remember those negative things that have been said or done to us, right? So then how could this activity be useful to do with children?
To teach them to interact with their playmates and be kind.
So to be kind to other people, interact more positively. Good.
Having the paper makes it more like interactive, like you're touching the paper and instead of just listening and, you know, daydreaming, you know, you're involved.
Right, so it made it hands-on. You weren't just listening, because the story was a little sad, but having to actually hurt your heart on paper, right, made it a little more real, made it, you know, more tangible, right? And then finally, you would get you to think about applying this. Okay, so how am I going to use what I learned today in my life? So what might a youth say if they did something like this? What might they say that they could, okay, how could I, you know, we talked about thinking before we react and being nicer to other people. What might be something that a youth would say, well, how can I do this in my daily life?
With more responsibility.
Right, good. Anything else?
I'll go right back to the think before you react or act. Think before you pour them out.
Yep, thinking, okay, how can I do this and not make a mess? You know, or can I ask for help? Right? That's making a decision and realizing, you know, I want to do this by myself, but I realize I might need some help. Okay, and that's okay. So we could have simply just read the story, done the heart, moved on. Okay. And you know what? That happens all the time. And a lot of times you still learn whatever, they learn something, right? But it's so important to get them thinking about reflecting on what they do and how can you apply it later. So even if they're planting a seed or they're tending a garden at the school or learning about, you know, recycling, getting them thinking about why did we do this and how can I use this later on is so important. Because what I love is when my kids come home and can tell me, not, you know, because what does every parent ask when the kid comes home from school? What did you do at school today? I love when my kids say something to themselves. And they don't say the activity they did, but they're like, oh, you know what? I didn't realize this. You know, we did this and I figured this is like what we did last year in science, or this is what so-and-so teacher told me before. We want them to make those connections between what they learned before or what they've experienced before. And that's a part of this too. So if you're doing a long-term program, helping the youth make connections between things. Remember 2 months ago when we came and talked about how important photosynthesis is for plants? Well, today we're going to practice it by doing this. It's helping them remember those things that they learned. Okay. So now this little heart activity is great. It's called the wrinkled heart if you're ever looking for it. But I wanted to walk you through something totally unrelated to Master Gardener programs to get you to kind of see this model, how it would work. Okay. So it's very simply, it's not just doing the do part. Asking them some questions after to reflect on what they did and then apply it to what they're doing in class or what they're doing at home and what they can do later on. Okay. Anyone have any questions about the process or anything about experiential learning? Whole idea, and you hit it right on the head. It's hands-on, making it tangible for the kids so they remember. And I can tell you, I did this activity a long time ago. I remember, like I think I still have my wrinkled heart in my office. Like I will remember this activity because I did it, it had that kind of impact, yet all it needed was a piece of paper. So sometimes the activities that youth will remember the most are sometimes the simplest. So now, I never would expect you to be able to read all of those, but this kind of goes back to that point of our whole job in 4-H is to teach life skills. You could Google 4-H life skills wheel and find this image a million times. These are all the things we're trying to build in youth. So this means for me, youth that I have involved in my 4-H programs for 5, 10 years, these are the things I hope they come back saying, you know what? Being a counselor at camp taught me how to be a member of a team and make positive decisions. Yes, I wanted them to learn how to make sure kids go to bed on time in the cabin, but really I wanted them to learn these things. So that's the end goal. The entire 4-H program, this is our end goal, no matter what the topic of the program might be. So you might hope, if you're with students for a long time, that you start to see some of these things. Contribution to group effort. That's a big one if you're doing something like a school garden. The kids want to see, year after year, I want to contribute and make sure this garden stays around. Maybe they're the kids that the school, they leave elementary school, but they still want to, can I still come and work on the garden even when they're in middle school? Because they have that, they feel so connected to that project. Now there's a lot of life skills on here. They actually are all correlated to the 4 H's. You'll see them in the middle. And if you didn't know what those were, it's head, heart, hands, and health. That's what the 4 H's stand for. I have had some, when I ask children that question, they like to tell me it's hip. I ask, what could the H's mean? And I sometimes joke it's a body part, so then I get hip a lot. They think that one of the H's is that. But so this is your end goal. So you always want to keep that in mind. So now we get into more the risk management side of it. So now you have theoretical, what should an experiential learning program look like? Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, thinking about what are the risk management things you need to consider. So first off, as extension agent, so for you, Forrest, he as an extension agent would be a mandatory reporter of child abuse, okay? You as a volunteer have the responsibility to report any suspected child abuse to Forrest, okay? Now, typically you might say, well, I'm just seeing youth at a one and done kind of event. That's typically probably not where you're going to have that type of suspicion. This might be something if you're doing a year-long program with the same children, you see kids over repeated times, okay? But if you, for any reason, have any suspicion that something may be going on with one of the youth that you're working with, your responsibility would be to let Forrest know. And then Forrest is the one, as a mandatory reporter in the state of Virginia, would need to report that to social services within 24 hours. Okay, that I know that's not an easy thing to think about or to talk about. In my career with extension, I've had to do it 3 times, where, you know, it's anonymous. I don't know how it turned out, but as a mandatory reporter, I take it seriously and realize if you have any suspicion at all, you can let Forrest know, and he would be the one that would make that call to social services. Okay. But the one thing you do want to keep in mind is, let's say you're in a school program and you have the same group of youth week after week, month after month. You want to be careful about confidentiality, that you don't want it to be something that, you know, several of the master gardeners that are involved with that program are talking about outside of the classroom, talking about if you have that suspicion, you don't need to talk about it with anyone but Forrest. You can just, this is, you know, it is not your job to talk to the student or the child and ask, you know, is everything okay? What's going on? You know, I noticed you have a bruise on your arm. That is not your job. Your job is purely to, if you feel that you've heard some things or see things that make you suspicious of that, then you just let Forrest know. Forrest reports it. Social services are the investigators, not volunteers or extension agents. Okay. This is really important, and even to think about in other vulnerable populations, like those with disabilities, as well as the elderly. Try to always be in a group of no less than 3 people, so that you're never in a one-on-one situation, in this instance with a child. Okay, so this would probably come into play mostly when maybe you're working in a garden setting outdoors, or in an after school or community program. You want to make sure that at least 2 adults are there, that you should never be one-on-one with a child. Okay, and it protects you as well as your master gardener program, because that just makes it so that there's always a third side to the story if something were to happen. Another thing to consider is, I also think about that as far as in a vehicle. I know in my position, sometimes it gets very difficult, that I have teens that need rides to things. I will not drive just one of my teens to something. I always make sure that I have at least 2. And sometimes that has meant a teen couldn't participate, but I won't put that teen in that situation or myself. Just to, you know, thinking about, we always want to be above suspicion that no one can, there's always someone that can vouch for what happened at that program. Okay. So I mentioned at the end that you want to think about scenarios to avoid problems. And I bring up the idea of duty of care in a class situation. So how many of you have worked in an in-school master gardener program before, probably pre-COVID? Okay, a lot of you. Raise your hand if you've ever been in that program and the teacher left the classroom, where it was just you in there. So it's really hard, because when the teachers have a guest speaker, and I remember, because I was a teacher, I go, ooh, I can go to the bathroom, I can get a drink. This is great, because some of them don't have that opportunity. However, the minute that school employee leaves the room and you are the only adult in there, you have taken over duty of care, meaning you are taking over responsibility. That if something were to happen in that classroom, it could be little. It could be Johnny and Jimmy decide to start smacking each other, or somebody takes somebody's stuff off their desk. Okay? That's putting you in a very difficult situation. So typically what I do when I am introducing a new school program or getting started for the year, I remind the teachers, I say, you know, I will need to always have a school employee in the room. Notice I didn't say that teacher themselves. Sometimes it's been a paraprofessional in the classroom, or a teacher's aide, someone that's employed by the school division. That way at all times, no matter what happens in that classroom, the school has that duty of care responsibility. It's never put solely on the master gardeners. And sometimes it's difficult because the teachers want to sneak out. So usually I just, at the beginning of a lesson, remind them and, say, it's no problem. I understand you may have to make copies or do something, but could you make sure that there's another school employee in the room with us? So that it could be difficult. but it's something just to keep in mind. So thinking about, that's something to think about ahead of time, that maybe when you're planning the program with the teachers, reminding them of that. And reminding them that's for the children's safety as well as the master gardeners, you know, because they are in school, they are at school, right? You are a guest in the classroom. So you don't want to take over that responsibility when they are the school's responsibility during the school day, okay? And a lot of teachers are aware of this, and they have been told not to leave guest speakers and volunteers alone in the classroom, but sometimes you might just have to give that reminder. And I know it's something, sometimes it's easy to forget or realize, oh wait, the teacher didn't come out with us to the garden. You know, reminding them they need to be with us in all settings. So if you're going out to the garden, that means someone needs to come out to the garden with us too, because you know, think about the tools you use in the garden. Kids might find those tools really fun to use in not the correct ways. So you want to make sure that there are school employees with you when you do something like that. Okay, before we go into record keeping, and I honestly can't believe I didn't include this in here. Maybe I was trying to think that we're going to be moving forward from this, but I should have a whole slide on masks right now. So whenever you are doing, extension policy right now states that if you are doing an indoor program with youth, that everyone needs to be masked, okay? Now that's already, right now, our K-12 schools have that requirement already, that they have to be masked during the school day, okay? But that also would apply to you coming into the classroom, okay? So just something to keep in mind. Outdoor programs with youth. So let's say you're having a after-school gardening program or a program out in the public, okay? If you are doing a program where it is a master gardener program, you're taking registrations and it's not part of a larger community event, our guideline right now is that if they are unvaccinated, they have to be masked. Now you might be saying, well, kids under 12 can't be vaccinated. Many groups have taken that to say outdoors, if it's going to be young children, everyone will end up being vaccinated and everyone will end up wearing a mask, okay? If you are not wearing a mask outside, it's just keeping that social distance, okay? So I know that is clear as mud, but that's currently what the guideline is. And I would imagine that right now, your main goal might be trying to get back into the classroom to establish some of those again, which thankfully the school mask policies match extension right now. So it's very simple. When you're going into the classroom, you wear a mask. And I have been in schools right now for several programs, and the teachers have made, if we've gone outside as part of the program, the kids haven't even taken the mask off. They just still think, oh, we're at school, we're still there. They just don't even, it's natural. They just have it on, okay? So I just wanted you to make you aware of that. For right now, masks are part of our risk thinking when we think about risk management. Masks are part of that, okay? Okay, as far as record keeping it goes. So you use, as a master gardener, use Better Impact for volunteer enrollment and to report your hours, okay? Well, 4-H uses something called 4-H Online, and we track how many adults work as our volunteers, meaning how many assist us in running youth programs in our locality, okay? So a good practice is that any master gardeners who work with youth, so no matter what the project might be, annually complete it's one piece of paper, short-term volunteer for 4-H form. That way, you are recorded as a youth volunteer as well as a master gardener. It is much shorter than what you ever filled out as a master gardener. It's really just name, address, demographic information, and then yes, I can have my photo taken. But really, this way, the 4-H program is protected because we know who are the adults working with youth in the locality, okay? And you also are, so you're recorded as a master gardener and a youth volunteer, okay? This would not be something that's in Better Impact because it's a 4-H form. It's not a Extension Master Gardener form, okay? So that's something that will come from the unit office, okay? And I know that you will hear more about that later on, once your youth programs get going. But it's a very short thing. I know my Master Gardener chapter, they typically do it the same time every year. You know, they'll say, okay, you know, bring them to a meeting, fill them out there, you're good to go for the year, okay? Also thinking about if you, and I'm sure you have a similar structure as other Master Gardener chapters, that you have a committee or a chair that works on your youth education programs. If any of your programs are going to be at least 6 hours or more, so those are going to be the ones that are with the same group over and over, let's say throughout a school year. Those youth could end up counting as part of our 4-H enrollment. Just like your chapter puts in your hours and continuing education hours and better impact, Virginia 4-H wants to see how many youth are engaged in our programs. So if you have any of those longer term programs, not as I like to call them one and done,
So I'll call you when I.
you want to make sure that the numbers in that program, so the number of youth in that program get enrolled in 4-H. And that's something you can work with Sandra in your extension office, the unit administrative assistant. She can help you do that and tell you what she would need. She does not need names of children. Really what it ends up being is the number of just demographics. So let's say you're working with all of 5th grade in a school, okay? I did my student teaching in Clara Bird Baker Elementary, so we're gonna use that as an example. So let's say you work with all of 5th grade in Clara Bird Baker. You can ask a teacher, could you please give me just a breakdown of the youth in this grade? Meaning, okay, there's 25 white males, 30 white females. That's all that we would need to be able to enroll that group. And that just lets the state know what kind of reach 4-H is having on those more longer term programs, okay? And you already know that you report your contacts and better impact. So when you do a youth program, you should be reporting those contacts already, just like you would for other Extension Master Gardener programs. And you know that contacts reporting got a lot easier about a year ago because you only now have to report numbers. So I reached 30 kids, 40 kids, whatever it might be, okay? Are there any questions about record keeping? So we mentioned that when you're doing youth programs, you want to use high quality research-based curriculum. These are just some examples, okay? One, Virginia 4-H as well as National 4-H have a lot of curriculums that are available to you. Some of them are free, some of them have a fee, but it definitely would not hurt to see what's already available in the extension office. I can tell you, even though there has not been a 4-H agent in a little while, and then there was a break between, I can probably guarantee you, for those of you that have been Master Gardeners for a while, all of Jeremy Johnson's curriculum is probably sitting in the James City County Extension Office. So I can tell you that there's curriculum there that you may not realize. So before you purchase something, it may not hurt to check with Sandra to see if it possibly is already there. And those curriculums are nice because sometimes they're laid out, you know, the lesson plan is written out. And if they're a 4-H curriculum, the reflection and application questions will already be in there. They'll give you the ideas for that because all of our lessons are written in that format, okay? There's many other cooperative extension publications and resources you could use. And notice that I said I didn't list a state by that because sometimes you might find a great resource from another state. Any of those cooperative extension resources would be good curriculum to use. Not sure if you've used the Junior Master Gardener curriculum before out of Texas. That's a great curriculum that they keep adding on to. They actually just added on an early childhood edition to that curriculum now. That curriculum does have a cost, but because it has been around a while, that's definitely one to check. If someone in the chapter already has it, has been used before, or if it's sitting in the extension office. Definitely one to check for before you purchase it. There's also a whole set of curriculums that they all start with the word project, Okay, there's Project Wet, which they just changed the logo. That was news to me yesterday. When I went to find the logo for this, I was like, which one's right? That is the new Project Wet logo. I hadn't seen that one before. That curriculum is all about water education and conservation. Project Learning Tree, you can guess what that one's about. That's talking about forestry and environmental education. But there are facets of some of those curriculums that would be great for a master gardener to use in their programs. Those are curriculums that typically you have to receive after going to a training. I would guarantee that there are probably trainings that happen either virtually or in person, and they're usually pretty low cost. You could Google Project Learning Tree Virginia, and it'll take you to their website, or Project Wet Virginia, and find out if you can take a training online, which they're doing now with COVID restrictions. And usually it's maybe $10, and then you get a curriculum book with just hundreds of lessons in it. So you could look up those type of curriculums. They are all research-based. Really just the key is that making sure you're not, that even if you find, you know what, I have this great activity. I led it at, I led it at a community festival before I was a master gardener. I think it would be great and it fits with what we're doing. You may just need to take it a step further, right? You might say, this is a great activity, but it doesn't really have any reflection or application to it. Or maybe it's not quite as hands-on. So you can still take some of those activities you have, but just think about how you can expand on it to really think about making it as hands-on and as experiential as you can. Excuse me, I told you that a schedule will change and it's always, okay, that's not an important one for my daughter. Reminding her to not text during the school day is important too. I'll tell her that I mentioned that while I did this too. So now I'm open for questions. I said this would probably be just about an hour, and with questions, we're just about at that. So I am happy to answer any questions you might have. Now this is kind of, because I wanted to make sure that this included really what was necessary as far as the EMG handbook, what is required for working with youth. This is like, I asked my master gardener coordinator in my locality, okay, pull out your handbook, show me what it says. This is really like level 1. There are additional topics that it said, you can be trained on, there are additional things, thinking about ages and stages of youth. So basically how developmental characteristics of youth are different at different ages, and that you work with youth differently depending on the age they are. That's kind of like a next step. Another one is also on thinking about how to deal with behavior, because depending on the program that you're doing, you may have to think about how to deal with managing a group of youth, or how to redirect behavior. So those are kind of further things to take it a step further. But what we just went over is what's required according to the handbook in working with youth. So you can know that you checked that off. Anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
What are you supposed to do if you're in a school and the teacher has an emergency and there's no one available to take over for them?
You'll have to repeat that question.
Sure. So the question was, what would happen if you're in a school and the teacher has an emergency and there's no one available to take over for them? Now, I can tell you, I've been in I can't say if it was an emergency situation, but more of a situation where the teacher left and she didn't tell me she was going to do that. So what I have done, honestly, on the fly, sometimes we have to make decisions a lot. I have made sure the classroom door was open. And I have taught a little bit closer to the door, almost mainly just to be more of kind of earshot between the hallway and the classroom, so that I'm a little more, so it's not, I'm behind a closed door with a group of kids, because that might happen. It's real life. I can describe a perfect situation, but sometimes it might happen. So I think probably the biggest thing is planning ahead and setting those expectations with the adults. It's just saying, if at all possible, this is our requirement, but we understand something might happen. But in that case, if something happens and you need to leave the room, please try to find someone that can come in as soon as possible. I think that's, but I have been known to open the door That way, if a kid were to say something or whatever, at least I'm not behind a closed door with that group of kids. But that's a good question. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Who keeps the form?
Okay, so Sandra, so your unit administrative assistant, Sandra Key, she would be the one that would keep all of the 4-H enrollment forms. Because she would be the one right now, because there is not a 4-H agent to share the responsibility of 4-H enrollment, Sandra would be the one that would do that.
And how do we get the form?
Sandra can get copies for you.
Go and check a chat box.
Sure, yeah, that would be great.
Quit screen sharing here.
But no, I can probably guarantee that there's a lot of curriculum sitting in the extension office. I should have asked Jeremy ahead of time and said, what did you leave in that office? What can I share with your master gardeners?
Okay.
I mean, how many of you were master gardeners when Jeremy was the 4-H agent? It's been a little while. Are you aware of what his position is now? He's the state program leader for 4-H, so he's my big boss. We'll put it that way. I do like to tease him though, because I'm exactly 5 days older than him. So I say, I do use that sometimes. Let him know that. At least he started a few years before I did.
For some reason, the chat box is not coming up. There we go.
Here we go.
Well, you're better at this than I am. Go ahead.
That's all right. Okay, I have a question. What is the best way for us to contact Forrest? Would it be email, text, or other?
Email is the best.
Email would be the best, and I'm sure that Forrest will get that. I'm not even going to try to repeat an email address on a mic. So Forrest will get that out to everyone. Let's see. Most schools have duty of care protocol in place and will arrange for another staff member to accompany class if the teacher cannot be there. This is also to protect the guests. Exactly. You know, I have been in situations where I thought the teacher was going to be there and it ended up being a paraprofessional, ended up being the music teacher, it ended up being someone else that worked for the school. So that's definitely a good point. Someone commented they love Project Learning Tree. That is a great one. I'm not familiar with the Children's Nature Network program. That might be one I have to look up and get a little more information on. I have heard of 1,000 hours outside. Yes. Yep. And just to keep in mind, a lot of those curriculums like Project WET, Project Learning Tree, they have free newsletters you can subscribe to via email, and they'll send out project ideas, lesson ideas, that kind of thing that way. Let's see. All right, I think I've gotten all the questions. Anyone else live have questions? Yes, Forrest.
If you have a situation where there's two different sets of rules with
Mhm.
masking, what's the protocol?
Now, okay, are you asking as far as for yourself personally or for the children?
To educate a group, if there's two different sets, one's one way, one's another way, with two different groups, say a school versus extension protocol.
Okay, so if I were to walk into a school, I myself personally am always going to follow the extension guideline. So even if that school, let's say next month, the governor says students in school do not need to wear masks anymore. I myself as an extension employee are going to follow whatever the guideline would be for extension. I cannot force extension's guideline on that classroom, but I will follow it myself. Does that make sense? Any others? All right, well, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. And I did have one last thing, but I saw when I walked in, I knew this was going to happen. I saw when I walked in that food was not allowed in here, so I didn't pass them out ahead of time. But whenever whenever I do a presentation for youth on risk, about risk management in youth, you know, a lot of times we like to bring treats for kids, right? Well, you pretty much have learned chocolate is off limits, pretty much. One, because it melts and it's messy, but also with the number of peanut allergies, it's just too difficult to bring chocolate. Plus, it's expensive. So the best candy to bring in with kids, because it is free from the big 9 allergens and it's cheap, are Dum-Dums. They are free from all the major allergens. So it's one of those, you'll see a lot of times teachers, it's the kind of candy they'll have in their room, because pretty much any child can have them. These and Smarties, those little like round candies in a roll, are another one. So, and they're cheap. That's good to, that's, you know, thinking about the budget, that's good. So because you have made it through this training for another year, and you are no longer a dummy in regards to working with youth, none of you, I don't think, were dummies before, you are free to come get a Dum-Dum.
Tara, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you bringing us up to date and getting us legal again. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, all of you, both online and for all of you who came in person. We appreciate it very much. Marty.
Bill, as a pediatric dentist, I'm gonna have to confiscate.
I'm sorry. I didn't bring a cake. I didn't know.
Take it home.
Isn't it good for business?
Good for business.
Yeah. Thank you all very much.
No.
Okay. Thank you.